What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're playing Forza Horizon 4 and I'll be talking about the best cars to use in ranked adventure. So before we begin, I just want to say that this video took the most amount of time and effort for me to make. It was a lot of time testing the cars, recording, editing, photoshopping, also recording this voiceover. So if you guys enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. So all these cars in this video are ranked based on my opinion and what I felt was the easiest, most consistent, and best to use overall. So let's start off the list with B-Class Dirt. So the number one car based on the cars that I've tested in this category is the Shelby Daytona Coupe from 1965. This car had the best lap time and sprint time, and I found its strengths were just all around. In second place, we have the Mazda MX-5 Miata from 1994. This car was pretty good at drifting and also straight line speed. Number 3, we have the Nissan Silvia Club Case from 1992. This car was pretty good at drifting and kind of an all-around car as well. Number 4, we have the Honda Civic RS from 1974. This car was a good all-around car and has some pretty good lap times. And number 5, we have the Subaru Legacy RS from 1990. This car had some pretty good sprint times, but not the best lap time. And its strengths is drifting, but it wasn't too easy to control, so that's why it's at number 5. At 6th place, we have the Nissan Pulsar GTI R from 1990. This car had a bit of a better lap time, but its sprint time was a little slower. It's a decent handling and drifting car. At number 7, we have the Jeep CJ5 Renegade from 1976. This car had the best lap time, but because of its top speed, it didn't have too great of a sprint time. This is a pretty good handling and jumping car. At number 8, we have the Ram 2500 Power Wagon from 2017. This car had the number 2 lap time, but also because of its top speed, it wasn't the best during the sprint race. This car is good for jumps. And at last place in the B-Class Dirt category, we have the Mitsubishi Galant VR4 from 1992. This car was a decent car. Its lap time was the worst. Its sprint time wasn't too bad, but I felt as though this car was harder to control, and it is good for straight line speed. Let's move on to B-Class Dirt during the winter. Number 1, we have our Jeep Wrangler Rubicon from 2012. This car had the second best lap time, but its sprint time was the best, and this is a great all-around car. In our number 2 spot, we have the Myers Manx from 1971. This car had the best lap time, but its sprint time wasn't the best. It was second to last, and this car is good for handling. Number 3, we have the Ram 2500 Power Wagon from 2017. This car had a pretty slow sprint time, but its lap time was a good bit better. This car is easy to handle and is also good for jumps. And in last place, we have the Jeep CJ5 Renegade from 1976. This car had the slowest lap time, but its sprint time was pretty good. I put it at last place because it's not the easiest to control and it drifts. Now let's move on to A-Class Road. In our number 1 spot, we have the Plymouth Atomic Punk Bubble Top from 1959. This car had the best lap time and it was almost the best sprint time as well. This car is a bit hard to control, but it has some pretty good handling and drifting. Once you get used to this car, it'll be a monster. Number 2, we have the Chevrolet Nova Super Sport 396 Forza Edition from 1969. This car had a decent lap time and it had the best overall sprint time. This is an all-around good car, but a bit hard to control. Number 3, we have the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2 from 1965. This was my favorite car from the bunch. It had a pretty good lap time. Its sprint time was also pretty good, and this is an amazing handling car. Number 4, we have the Ford Roadster Hula Girl from 1932. This car was a pretty good car, but I found that it was a bit hard to control because of its drifting, but its strengths are in straight line speed. In our number 5 spot, we have the Shelby Daytona Coupe from 1965. This car didn't have the best lap time, but its sprint time was one of the best, and I'd rate this as an all-around car. Number 6, we have the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale from 1968. This car had one of the slowest lap times, but its sprint time was pretty good, and I'd rate this as an all-around car. Number 7, we have the GMC Cyclone from 1991. A recently released car. This car didn't have the best lap time or sprint time. I would say that it takes a good bit to get used to. It's good at handling and drifting. Number 8, we have the Holden Torana A9X from 1977. This car had one of the best lap times. Its sprint time was the issue though. I rate this as an all-around car. Coming in at number 9, we have the Ford GT40 Mark I from 1964. This car wasn't the best. It felt pretty good. Its sprint time was overall decent, and it's a pretty good handling car. And in 10th place, the last place from the cars that I've tested, we have the Nissan Skyline GTR V-Spec from 1997. This car had one of the slowest lap times, and it was a decent sprint time. I'd rate this as an all-around car, but it was a bit hard to control. Now let's go to A-Class Road during the winter. In our first place again, we have the Plymouth Atomic Punk Bubble Top from 1959. This car had the best sprint time as well as lap time, and I'd rate this as a good handling car. Number 2, we have the Ford Roadster Hula Girl from 1932. This car had the second best lap time and sprint time, but it was also a bit hard to control. This car is strong at drifting, but it takes a good bit of skill. And last but not least, we have the Chevrolet Nova Super Sport 396 Forza Edition from 1969. This car had the overall slowest lap time and sprint time, but I'd rate this as an all-around car. Now let's go to A-Class Dirt. In first place, again, we have the Plymouth Atomic Punk Bubble Top from 1959. This car was really good all around. In our second place, we have Mercedes-Benz X-Class from 2018. This car was really good at handling as well as taking jumps. Number 3, we have the Ford Roadster Hula Girl from 1932. This car had the best lap time. It was also a pretty good sprint time, but it was hard to control. It's good with drifting and jumps. Number 4, we have the Ford Ranger Raptor from 2019. This car had a decent sprint time as well as a pretty good lap time. This car is good for handling and taking jumps. In our number 5 spot, we have the Toyota Celica GT4 RC ST185 from 1992. This was a pretty good car. It had the slowest lap time because it's not that great for jumps, but it also had a pretty decent sprint time. It's an all-around car. Number 6, we have the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 from 2017. This car had a pretty decent lap time. It was third place. Its sprint time wasn't too good because of its top speed, but this is also an all-around car. And last but not least, coming in at 7th place, we have the Ford F-150 Raptor from 2017. This car had a decent lap time, but it was the slowest during the sprint because of its top speed. This car is good for handling as well as drifting. That's everything for A-Class Dirt. Let's go to A-Class Cross Country. In this class, I tested all these cars by going to the gate of the Trailblazer, accelerating from there and taking the same line. In our number 1 spot, we have the Mercedes-Benz X-Class from 2018. This car had a pretty good Trailblazer time, but its sprint time was the best, and I'd rate this as all around. It is very good for taking jumps at high speeds. Number 2, we have the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 from 2017. This had the 3rd fastest Trailblazer time. It was the 3rd at cross country. This car is good for handling and drifting. Number 3, we have the Ford Ranger Raptor from 2019. It wasn't the best Trailblazer time, but it was the 2nd best sprint time. This car is good for handling and drifting. In our number 4 spot, we have the Ford F-150 Raptor from 2017. This car was decent. It had the slowest Trailblazer time, but its sprint time was the best. I would rate this all around. For number 5, we have the Plymouth Atomic Punk Bubble Top from 1959. This car had the 2nd fastest Trailblazer time, but because this car is not too good at handling jumps and going through water, I would rate this at 2nd to last. This car is good for grip. And in our last place, Number 6, we have the Toyota Celica GT4 RC ST185 from 1992. This car had the fastest trailblazer time, but because this car isn't too good at taking the jumps and going through water, it had the slowest sprint time. Now let's go to S1 class road. In our outshining number 1 spot, we have the ATS GT from 2018. This car had one of the fastest lap times. Its sprint time was, however, the best. This car is amazing for handling and braking. Number 2, we have the Maserati MC12 from 2004. This car also had a really good lap time, but its sprint time was a little slower than the ATS. This car is good for handling and straight line speed. Coming in at number 3, we have the Alfa Romeo 4C from 2014. This car had a bit of a slower lap time. Its sprint time was also a little bit slower. This car is also good for handling. And number 4, we have the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale from 1968. This car had the best lap time, and its sprint time was a bit faster than the 4C, but I found that it was a little bit harder to control. This car is good for handling and grip. In our number 5 spot, we have the Shelby Monaco King Cobra from 1963. This car had a pretty slow lap time compared to all the others. Its sprint time was a bit slower as well. This car is all around. Number 6, we have the Dodge Viper SRT10 ACR from 2008. This car was tied with the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale down to the millisecond during the lap time. Its sprint time, however, was slower, and I would rate this car for handling. Number 7, we have the McLaren 12C Coupe from 2011. This car had a slower lap time compared to almost every car before, and it was a millisecond slower than the Dodge Viper during the sprint. This car is rated for handling. Number 8, we have the Ford GT from 2005. This was second place during the lap times, but its sprint, however, lacked. This car is good for handling, but it tends to drift a bit. Number 9, we have the Toyota Supra RZ from 1998, better known as the Toyota Supra Mark IV. This car had a much slower lap time, but its sprint time was a bit faster than some of the others. This car is down here because it tends to drift a bit. Number 10, we have the Plymouth Atomic Punk Bubble Top from 1959. This car was a millisecond slower than the Toyota Supra during the lap time. Its sprint time was a bit faster. This car is good for straight line, speed, and grip. Number 11, we have the James Bond Edition Aston Martin DBS from 2008. This car's lap time was decent, a bit slower than the Atomic Punk and the Supra. However, it was almost a whole second slower during the sprint time. This car is decent for handling. Number 12, we have the Lamborghini Countach LP5000 QV from 1988. This car's lap time was a millisecond faster than the Maserati MC12, but it had a slower sprint time. This car is all around. At number 13, we have the Honda NSX-R from 1992. This car's lap time wasn't too bad, but its sprint time lacked majorly. It came in almost 5 seconds later than the ATS GT. This car is decent for handling. Number 14, we have the Bugatti EB110 from 1992. This car's lap time was also pretty good, but because of its top speed, its sprint time wasn't too great. This car is pretty good for handling. Coming in at number 15, we have the Lotus Elise GT1 from 1997. This car's lap time wasn't the greatest, however it was really slow during the sprint time, but it's an overall good car for handling. Number 16, we have the Nissan Skyline GTR V-Spec from 1997. This car's lap time was a bit slower than the Lotus Elise. Its sprint time was a bit faster, but it's number 16 because this car tends to drift. Number 17, we have the Acura NSX from 2017. This car's lap time wasn't too bad, but it was the slowest sprint time. This car tends to drift and its top speed isn't the greatest. At number 18, we have the Toyota GT86 from 2013. This had one of the slowest lap times. Its sprint time wasn't too bad, but this car also tends to drift a bit. It's good for straight line speed. And last but not least, at number 19, we have the Koenigsegg CCX from 2006. This car had the slowest lap time. It was one of the slowest sprint times as well. This car is good for straight line speed. So let's go on over to S1 Road during the winter. At number 1, we have the ATS GT from 2018. Again, this had the best lap time. It also had the best sprint time. This car is amazing for handling and braking. At number 2, we have the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale from 1968. This car produced the second best lap time. Its sprint time was also the second best. This is an all-around car. Number 3, we have the Toyota Supra RZ from 1998. This car's lap time was one of the slowest, but its sprint time wasn't too bad. This car tends to drift, but it is good for a straight line speed. Number 4, we have the Porsche Cayman GTS from 2015. This car tied with the Toyota Supra RZ at the same lap time, down to the millisecond, but it was about 2 seconds slower on the sprint time. This car is good for handling and grip. Number 5, we have the Ford GT from 2005. This car had a bit of a faster lap time and a bit of a faster sprint time. It's also good for handling and grip, but I felt the Porsche Cayman was a little bit better. Number 6, we have the Ford Mustang GT Liberty design from 2018. This car had the 3rd fastest lap time, however, the 3rd slowest sprint time. This car is all around. And last but not least, at number 7, we have the Bugatti EB110 Supersport from 1992. This car had the 3rd slowest lap time, but its sprint time was the slowest. This is an all-around car, but not too great for straight line speed. Now let's go to S1 class dirt. At number 1, we have the Ford GT from 2005. With one of the fastest lap times and had the fastest sprint time, this car is all around. In second place, we have the Ford Mustang GT Liberty design from 2018. This car had the 2nd fastest lap time and the 2nd fastest sprint time. This car is good for handling. In third place, we have the Lola number 6 Penske Sunoco T70 Mark IIIB from 1969. This car had a pretty good lap time, its sprint time was the best overall, and this is an all-around car. Number 4, we have the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale from 1968. It had the best lap time and best sprint time, but I didn't feel like it was too consistent. Number 5, we have the Porsche 906 Carrera 6 from 1966. Not the greatest lap time and not the greatest sprint time, but this is an all-around car. Number 6, we have the Porsche Cayman GTS from 2015. A pretty good lap time, however it wasn't the best during the sprint. This car is good for handling. Number 7, we got the Bugatti EB110 Supersport from 1992. This car wasn't that great during the lap because it's not great at handling jumps. Although it did have a decent sprint time, this car is good for handling. At number 8, we have the Ram Rebel TRX Concept from 2017. A pretty good lap time, but not a great sprint time. This car is pretty good for handling and drifting. At 9th place, we have the Shelby Monaco King Cobra from 1963. Again, not the best lap time, but its sprint time was a bit better. This car tends to drift, but it's good in straight line speed. Number 10, we got the Toyota number 1 T100 Baja Truck Welcome Pack from 1993. This car had the best lap time, but lacking in top speed. The sprint time wasn't the best. This is an all-around car. At number 11, we have the Lotus E-Spirit V8 from 2002. The 3rd slowest lap time, the sprint time wasn't that great. This is another all-around car. At number 12, we have the Jeep Trailcat from 2016. One of the best lap times, but lacking in top speed. Its sprint time wasn't the best. This is another all-around car. At number 13, we have the Lancia 037 Stradale from 1982. With the slowest lap time, also a really slow sprint time. This is a decent all-around car. And coming in at last place at number 14, we have the Toyota number 1 T100 Baja Truck from 1993. I'm not sure if it was just a tune, but this car didn't feel as good as the Welcome Pack one. Its lap time was over 2 seconds slower than the Welcome Pack, and its sprint time was 6 seconds slower, but this car tends to drift. Now let's move on to S1 class cross country. In our number 1 spot, we have the Toyota number 1 T100 Baja Truck Welcome Pack from 1993. With not the greatest trailblazer time because its acceleration wasn't all there, it was the best, however, in the sprint. This car is all around. In our second spot, we have the normal Toyota number 1 T100 Baja Truck from 1993. This car was decent during the Trailblazer, a little bit faster than the Welcome Pack, and it had the 2nd best sprint time. This car is good for handling and drifting. In our number 3 spot, we have the Ram Rebel TRX Concept from 2017. Not a bad Trailblazer time. It was a 3rd during the sprint. This car is good for handling and straight line speed. At number 4, we have the Jeep Trailcat from 2016. Its Trailblazer time was better than the 3 before because it's better at acceleration, but overall during the sprint it was a little slower. This car is pretty good for handling. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ford Mustang GT Liberty design from 2018. The 2nd best Trailblazer time, but the 3rd slowest sprint time because it couldn't handle going through water very well and it couldn't take jumps as well as the other cars. This is an all around. At number 6, we have the Lancia 037 Stradale from 1982. This This car had the third best trailblazer time, but the second worst sprint time. This is another all-around car. And in our last place at number 7, we have the Bugatti EB110 Supersport from 1992. Although it produced the best trailblazer time, it couldn't handle too well on the jumps and through the water. It had the slowest sprint time. This car is decent at handling. Now let's move on to the final category with S2 class road racing. In our first place, we have the Koenigsegg CCGT from 2008. With the best lap time and the second best sprint time, this car was very good at handling. In our second place, we have the Ferrari F40 Competizione from 1989. With the second best lap time and a pretty good sprint time, this car was good at handling as well as straight line speed. In third place, we have the Pagani Zonda R from 2010. This car had a pretty good lap time, but not the best. This car did have the best sprint time. It's good for handling as well as straight line speed. At number 4, we have the fastest car in the game, the Ferrari 599XX Evolution from 2012. It didn't have the best lap time because it's not the greatest at handling. It did, however, have a pretty good sprint time. This car is amazing at straight line speed. At number 5, we have the Lamborghini Sesto Elemento from 2011. This car had a good lap time. Its sprint time was a little slower. This car is amazing at handling. At number 6, we have the Mercedes-Benz AMG CLK GTR from 1998. This car's lap time was a little bit slower than the Sesto, and its sprint time was a little bit faster. I would rate this as an all-around car. At number 7, we have another Lamborghini, the Lamborghini Diablo GTR from 1999. It had one of the slowest lap times, and it was decent during the sprint. This is a pretty good handling car. At number 8, we have the McLaren F1 GT from 1997. A bit faster than most, coming in at number 3 for the lap times, though this car kind of lagged during the sprint. This car is amazing at handling. In our number 9 spot, we have the Italy Design 01 from 2018. With a pretty slow lap time and the slowest sprint time, this car is decent but a bit hard to control, and I would rate this as an all-around car. At number 10, we have the TVR Cerbera Speed 12 from 1998. This car had a pretty slow lap time as well as a pretty slow sprint time. It was a bit hard to control, it tends to drift, but it's good at straight line speed. In our last place at number 11, we have the TVR Sagaris Forza Edition from 2005. With the slowest lap time and a pretty slow sprint time, this car was also pretty hard to control because it tended to drift. It's also good at straight line speed. So that's it for the video, guys. I'll leave the link to the spreadsheet with all the information in the description. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe. This video did end up taking me around 60 hours to complete, going through testing, recording, editing, photoshopping, and recording this voiceover. So I would love to see what you guys thought of the video. That's it for today. I hope you guys have a good day.